Hello, everyone. I'm Rob Satloff. I'm the director of the Washington Institute, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this very special event. Today is Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day, a day of remembering both to honor the victims of the Holocaust, Jews and millions of others who were killed by Nazis and fascists throughout World War II, but not just to remember, it's also a day to prevent and to think about everything that needs to be done to prevent a return of genocide and to prevent and to be aware of what it means to have genocide and its terrible repercussions for victims around the world today. In recent years, a new group of people have become part of the remembering. And these are, I'm referring to, Arabs. For many decades, historians and activists would think of the Arab world as a place of distortion and denial of the Holocaust. But recently, there have been important changes, a growing recognition of the relevance of this history and the importance of remembering. And so today, while we recognize the progress that's been made and we resolve to continue the effort to spread Holocaust awareness and education where it has not yet been spread, I am so delighted to welcome to this panel three prominent Arab intellectuals from different parts of the Middle East, each of whom in his or her own way have made important strides in helping to combat denial and distortion and to embrace history, teaching, and the relevance of the Holocaust in the Middle East today. I'm really delighted to welcome my three friends, Dr. Ali El-Nuaimi, the chairman of Hidayah, which is the leading Emirati institution for countering violent extremism. And he will be our first speaker. I'm very proud to have Dr. Zeina Barakat. Zeina is the academic coordinator for the European Wasatiyah Graduate School for Peace and Conflict Resolution in Flensburg, Germany. Zeina, of course, has been teaching these issues way back in Jerusalem, where I first met her. Zeina is Palestinian. I'm delighted to welcome her to this program. And El-Mehdi Boudra. El-Mehdi is the founder and chairman of Mimouna. Mimouna is an organization of Moroccan young Muslims, and I guess not so young anymore, growing in age. Moroccan Muslims committed to preserving the Jewish history, culture, and legacy in the Kingdom of Morocco, including the Holocaust experience that occurred in that country as well. So three different perspectives from the Emirates, from Palestine, from Morocco. I'm really delighted that we can have this conversation. Each of our panelists will offer some opening remarks, and then we'll have a conversation. And you, whether you're on Zoom or you're on another platform such as YouTube, you're very welcome to contribute to this conversation, either by sending questions in to the Q&A function on Zoom or by emailing me directly at rsatloff, RSATLOFF, at washingtoninstitute.org, O-R-G. And I will do my best to bring your comments and questions into our conversation. With that, I'm going to turn the floor over to our first speaker. I'm really delighted to have Dr. Ali El-Nuaimi joining us. Dr. El-Nuaimi, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Rob. Good day, everyone. You see, it's an honor for me to be part of this outstanding panel. Thank you, Rob, for giving me the opportunity to speak on this day, which is a day that's, it should be part of not only the Jews' memory, it's the human memory. It should be within the memory of the world, regardless of the nation, the country, the religious, the ethnic, the culture. Before I go and talk about, the Arab world and the Holocaust and the educational system in the Arab world, how they did to the Holocaust, You see, I'd like to emphasize certain things, which is, I think, is very important. You know, although the victims deserve to be memorized, and it's an important, you know, on this day to come and talk about them and remind everyone, especially the new generation, about this tragedy. I think at the same time, we have to review what we all have done. Did we succeed actually in talking about this tragedy in a way that first we will bring the justice that the victim deserve, and also make sure that we will prevent such a thing from happening again? Unfortunately, regardless of what all of us have done in changing laws, doing conferences, writing articles, publishing books, unfortunately, I see the hate that at the end led to the Holocaust tragedy. I see it on the rise, especially in Europe, where this tragedy actually happening. And this is why I think we, all of us, have to review why we didn't succeed as we want. Why there is still some human beings living with us, around us, still carry, you know, that hate, carry something in their, you know, deep heart, which at the end, you know, towards the others because of their religion, or their color, or their ethnic. So I think we need to review, you know, what all of us have done regarding, you know, the issue of the Holocaust. It's not only the Arab world. I know in the Arab world there is so many things need to be done, but I think we need a holistic approach. We need to create a new narrative that will target the heart and the mind of all human beings, especially the new generation. It's, you know, we found out it's, you know, it's not, changing the law is not enough. Doing conferences is not enough. We need to organize an international, maybe international summit to talk about this issue, review what all have been done, and we have to create a new strategy that through it we will have initiatives, programs, not only in the educational sector, but will engage all the stakeholders to create a narrative that will gain the heart and the mind of the new generation, that will make the human values that we all have in common prevail at the end. I think it's very important, you know, to emphasize this issue on this day, because the victim deserve, you know, not only to be remembered, but also to be not only in our memory, but also in our heart and part of our future, to make sure that this tragedy will not happen again. This is an issue that, you know, I wanted to emphasize as an introduction before I go and talk about the Arab world. You see, unfortunately, when it's come to the Arab world, talking about the Holocaust, you know, I read, Rob, your article that you sent to me today. You know, unfortunately, talking about the Holocaust before 20 years, 30 years, that would be considered, you know, if you deny it, people will look at you, you know, as someone who are, you know, against them, who are an enemy of the Palestinian, an enemy of the Arab. That's the culture that these generations were, you know, approached and educated in the last 70 years. And you see, I think, especially the historian, public figures, they fail, you know, to carry their responsibility in saying the truth about this tragedy, and coming forward and having the courage to speak up, because there was a political agenda that hijacked the truth in this subject, and at the end it was used actually against whom? against those follower of Judaism, the Jews, because they were, it's part of a political conflict in our region. And here, I want to clarify this. Whenever we talk about issue related to us as human beings, I think we should put our political differences aside and deal with the threat that target us as human beings, as a common threat to all of us, regardless of our religion, our nationality, our color, our ethnic. And what happened during the Holocaust, actually, it's not only targeting Jews, but also it's targeting human beings. Humanity actually was the victim, but it was in the symbol of Judaism. And this is why I think it's very important that we encourage public figures, historians, those community leaders, religious leaders, to come forward always and speak up from their heart, to protect the human values, the common values that we have, regardless of our political differences. The issue of the Holocaust within the Arab world, unfortunately, was dealt with through a political agenda. And this is where there was the denial. The good thing that our friends in Morocco, had the courage before all of us and moved forward, and they had the blessing and the support of His Highness King Mohammed, and actually they started this. Later on, things start through small initiatives within the UAE, within Bahrain, and then from Saudi Arabia, His Excellency Mohammed Al-Isa had the courage to come forward and speak up about this issue. But I think there is a lot not to be done. There is, if we want, to the truth to prevail, we have to use a holistic approach where we have to engage all the stakeholders, starting from education, religious leaders, public figures, community leaders, to talk about this, and they should have the courage and to come forward and speak about it. When it comes now actually to I review the many curriculum in the Arab world, it's not there. In the UAE, after the announcement of the Abraham Accord, in the Ministry of Education, they form a committee. I am aware of this committee, I'm aware of what they are doing. They are putting the Holocaust part of the curriculum. They will start implementing it next September with the new academic year. It will be within the Ministry of Education. We believe it should start from KG, elementary, and going up until the university. We have a plan in the UAE to engage the university in initiatives, conferences that will talk publicly and even invite some of the survivors of the Holocaust to come forward and speak, not only with faculty, but speak with the student. And, because what we need to create a narrative that, will target the heart and the mind. It's good to change the law. It's good to write a book. It's good to arrange a conference. But if we don't gain the heart and the mind of the new generation, we will not succeed. I think we need to have the courage, come forward. And I believe from my side, the Arab world has changed. We have many in the Arab world who believe in this and who believe that the truth should prevail, and the victims, they deserve not only to be memorized, but also that we speak their story and teach it in our curriculum and make sure that the new generation are aware of this tragedy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ali. Very important. Thank you. I'm going to turn now to Dr. Zeina. So we move from the UAE to a group in the Middle East that is perhaps most intimately connected in the sense that they have lived right next door to the Jewish state, and perhaps know much more about this than many others in the Arab world. And I'm very interested in Dr. Zeina's experience teaching the Holocaust in the Arab world. Dr. Zeina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you all for being here today. Allow me to begin my presentation with my personal account. Sorry, it's not moving. Okay, yeah. Allow me to begin my presentation with my personal account. I remember very well when I first heard the word Holocaust. It was mentioned in one of my history classes at the Schmitz Girls College by my Palestinian teacher from Bethlehem. She mentioned it as a part of the Second World War, saying there was a genocide of 6 million people burned to death by the Germans. Without any further details, the textbook did not mention it, so we did not feel we had to study it since it would not be part of our final exam. All I knew is that there were people burned to death. I don't think she said they were even Jews. From my personal account, I understand one of the key problems, namely lack of adequate literature on Holocaust in Arabic language. So if any students have the willingness to learn more about the Holocaust on their own, they will widely exposed only to anti-Semitic literature that portrays the Holocaust as a lie and a Zionist fabrication or exaggeration. Here, I have few examples from the anti-Semitic literature in Arabic that influenced Arab culture, such as the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, Jews are behind every crime, the Holocaust, the biggest lie, fill the shelves of bookstores in most Arab cities. Let us consider some of the obstacles to Holocaust education. I see basically 5 obstacles on different levels. First, educational. Holocaust education is not part of educational curriculum in school or universities. The Palestinians feel Nakba education should take precedence over Holocaust education. Second, political. The Holocaust is perceived as the source of the Palestinian 1948 Nakba, which resulted in the loss of the Palestinian identity and homeland. The ongoing Israeli occupation is a daily reminder for anti-normalization and boycott sentiments. Third, religious. Religious education in general advocates irreconcilable enmity between Islam and Judaism. Fourth, psychological. Palestinian society has been deeply wounded by 1948 and 1967 defeats, and the pain and suffering has not yet healed. 5. Socially, the Holocaust education advocates are demonized and labeled as traitors and normalizers in society. However, there is a good reason why Palestinians should learn about the Holocaust. One is to go into praxis. From 2013, I have been privileged to be involved in the praxis of the Holocaust teaching, being part of a trilateral university project that involved Israelis, Palestinians, and Germans. Its aim was to analyze individual and group reactions for experiencing the suffering of the other as a means for reconciliation and conflict resolution. As you can see, in 2014, we conducted an excursion to Auschwitz. In 2017, another 2 excursions to Buchenwald concentration camp, 30 students each. And in 2021, we are planning to conduct another excursion to Buchenwald. Here I have few examples from Palestinian students visiting Auschwitz. One of the students remarked, "I was deeply touched when we learned how the dead bodies of human beings were disposed of by furnaces without showing any empathy and respect, and then the ashes of human beings were collected and dumped like garbage." Another student remarked, "Visiting Auschwitz and learning about the Holocaust did not make us less nationalistic, but more humanistic." Another student wrote on Facebook, visiting Poland was a great educational experience. I learned a lot about the Holocaust, especially the concentration camp. Prior going to Auschwitz, I didn't really know what the Nazi concentration camp were all about. Another moment that also deeply touched us and me personally, when the tour guide explained how the poor sanitary facilities were used by prisoners. It was so degrading to make prisoners share the toilet every morning, giving them less than a minute to use it with the other prisoners at the same time, with no water to clean up. And so they spend their time in the camp dirty and in filthy clothes, contracting infections and diseases. Students learned that the Holocaust, unlike the Nakba, was not a political conflict that could be resolved through diplomacy. The very idea of a Nazi-Jewish peace agreement is absurd. Yet the Palestinian-Israeli peace agreement is a positive vision for resolving the conflict. Palestinian participants left with unforgettable sad memories. The visit taught them that the impact of the Holocaust continued after liberation, that it is still part of the fabric of Jewish society, thinking, and psychology. Critical questions were addressed by the students. One of them, why should we learn about the Holocaust when Israelis have legislated the term Nakba as illegal and banned Nakba education in their schools? Another question that struck me personally, should I remain chained by ignorance but accepted within my community, or crack the taboos of ignorance and by doing so risk being victimized and ostracized by the community? So again, why Holocaust education? Drawing on my own research and experience in connection with important research that has been published, and here I am referring to an article by Dr. Robert Satloff and Professor Dajani back in 2011 entitled Why Palestinians Should Learn About the Holocaust. Let me systematize 5 points. First, Holocaust education is a sign of respect for historical truth. Second, learning the lessons of the past is necessary in order to avoid their recurrence in the future. Showing empathy for the suffering of others contributes to regaining humanity by both reconciling with your own memories, intrapersonal reconciliation, and reconciling with the other, interpersonal reconciliation. The Holocaust is not exclusively a Jewish concern, but it is deeply a human concern. Fighting anti-Semitism is imperative both in the Arab world and worldwide. In sum, Palestinians as well as the Arabs and Muslim world need to become more familiar with the history of the Holocaust. Also, Jews need to know there were many Arabs opposed to Nazism, and there were those who helped save Jews during the Holocaust. And here I am drawing on the example of this book, Among the Rituals, by Dr. Robert Satloff, how Arabs in France and North Africa gave refuge to Jews. Here I am, Professor Dajani and myself became pioneers in teaching Holocaust education in the Arab world by conducting workshops, writing articles and books. And here we have some of the books that we have published. So the road ahead, we didn't stop with the Auschwitz visit in 2014, but we conducted 2 more trips to Buchenwald concentration camp in Germany in 2017, 30 students each. The path of Holocaust education is paved, and the torch will be carried by the European Wasatiyya Graduate School for Peace and Conflict Resolution at European University of Lenzburg in Germany. The 4th excursion will be to Buchenwald, will take place end of this year. The European Wasatiyya Graduate School for Peace and Conflict Resolution will bring PhD candidates from Israel, Palestine, Germany, and the international community to promote peaceful coexistence among the Abrahamic faith. To conclude, We need to undermine the extremist trend by adopting the following. First, to have ministries of education include Holocaust to be compulsory studies in school and universities curricula, so that never again will become deeply rooted in our humanistic culture. Second, to fight anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and other extremist ideologies through people-to-people activities by the civil society. Third, to recommend that Arab capitals to establish galleries and museums to educate the public about genocides and massacres to avoid their recurrence in the future. And fourth, to develop religious literacy and awareness. The lessons we learn from the Holocaust and other genocide is that people make choices. Some choose to take part, some choose to fight it, while others choose to be bystanders. My choice not to take part, not to be a bystander, but to fight it. May I take the opportunity to thank Dr. Satloff for inviting me to be part of this noble gesture and the Washington Institute for hosting this event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zaina. That was very powerful. I really appreciate your remarks. And for those of you that didn't quite get the name of Zaina's partner, that's Dr. Mohammed Dajani, also of Jerusalem, who was associated with the Washington Institute after he and Zaina went and did the first trip to a concentration camp, to Auschwitz, went back and then was subject to threats and car bombing, and then spent some time with us in Washington as our colleague here. And now he's back in Jerusalem. And I know that Zaina and Mohammed are wonderful colleagues, and I applaud everything that they have done and continue to do in this regard. So thank you very much for your remarks. We're now going to turn to Mehdi Boudra, moving from Jerusalem to the far western corner of the Arab world. Mehdi, I believe, is in Rabat. So Mehdi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Satloff, for inviting me to be in this great panel with Dr. Anouaimi and Dr. Barakat. You know, as the Middle East is very diverse, I will try to speak only about Holocaust education in Morocco and the Moroccan experience. But before talking about Holocaust education, it will be great if we can talk about the Holocaust period in Morocco so we can have an idea. You know, the roots of the Jewish community in Morocco go back to antiquity. In World War II, the Jewish population in Morocco reached 250,000 Jews living in Morocco. It was the biggest non-Ashkenazi community in the world and the biggest Jewish community in the Muslim world. Despite some fluctuation in tensions that has marked North Africa between Muslims and Jews, in Morocco, Jews and Muslims have historically enjoyed a relatively peaceful coexistence. This unique bond between Muslims and Jews in Morocco was highlighted during the Holocaust, when late Sultan Muhammad V refused Vichy laws against its Jewish subjects. Moreover, thanks to international diplomats, Morocco opened its doors to Jews escaping from Europe. During World War II, the city of Tangiers became a haven for Jewish refugees. Today, the Jewish community in Morocco, living in Morocco, does not exceed 3,000 members. However, this very active and small community remains one of the strongest communities in the Arab world and the Muslim world, and it's still the biggest community in the Arab world, and have strong links with the 1 million Moroccan Jews in the world. Today, Holocaust education is still a taboo in many places in the Arab world and also in Morocco. And while Morocco is one of the countries where there is a good relations between Jews and Muslims, Holocaust denial has made its way to the younger generation of Moroccans, largely to the wrong perception that the Holocaust is a European story. While the Holocaust denial can be observed in Morocco, the current monarch, Mohammed V, King Mohammed VI, openly recognized and said in a message to the Aladdin Project in 2009, that the Holocaust is one of the dark chapters of human history. This message was the first from an Arab leader to recognize openly the Holocaust and openly for Holocaust education. In 2011, Association Mimuna, in partnership with Kivunim, held the first conference on Holocaust in the Arab world. This conference is part of a program initiated by Association Mimuna to promote the education of Holocaust. Since then, Mimuna organized more than 30 programs in several cities in Morocco to educate about these dark chapters of human history. The Holocaust education materials created by Association Mimuna was tailored to the specific context of the Arab and Muslim world, using relevant wordings, metaphors, names, and historic events. In 2018, Association Mimuna, in partnership with the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, created the first Holocaust curriculum by and for Muslims. It was created thanks to historians like Dr. Omar Boum from UCLA, but also historians from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum and young people and young researchers from Morocco. Today, Association Mimuna work is part of a larger movement of individual initiative by civil society, by the media, and by educators to promote the foundation of Holocaust education in Morocco, although not easy to implement. Today, we should think that this event will be an opportunity to rethink together on how to teach the young generation about the Holocaust as one of the dark chapters of human history. We have the great experience from Dr. Barakat and Dr. Nuaimi, and it can be the foundation of Holocaust education in the Arab world. Thank you, Dr. Satloff.
Thank you very much. Very interesting, very important work that you're doing, Mehdi. Let me invite everybody who is watching. If you're watching on Zoom, please use the Q&A function. If you're watching on YouTube or another platform, please feel free to email me directly at rsatloff@washingtoninstitute.org if you have questions that we can filter into this conversation. So look, let me begin. You've all outlined ambitious, worthy, inspiring objectives. Let's talk for a minute about some of the obstacles. It's interesting to me that we have one person from Mehdi from a country that has long had a Jewish population, one Dr. Ali from the Emirates that doesn't have a historical large Jewish population, but now there is beginning to be a Jewish population in the Emirates. And Zaina, certainly Palestinians have lived next to a Jewish population, although in I think it's fair to say considerable tension for decades. So let's talk about some of the obstacles that each of you face in your own environments to advancing the goal of broadening Holocaust awareness in your countries and in your regions. I'll start with you, Dr. Ali.
Thank you, Rob. Well, you see, actually within the UAE, we don't have obstacles, but within the region, yes, we do. You know, unfortunately, the mind and the heart of the Arab people in the last 70 years were hijacked by those, you know, who promote extremism and who promote hate. And also the conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict actually contributed to that in a way. Now, you know, after the announcement of the Abraham Accord, the message that I want the world, and especially our friend in Europe and in the United States to know it, the region has changed. The new generation, you know, they want peace. You know, they feel that they were victims. They suffered for decades because of those ideologies, radicalism, wars, terrorism, and they want, you know, they want a better future for themselves and for their kids. And so they see the added value of the peace initiative in the region, where peace will be for all. Now, well, I don't see it as a challenge But I hope that our friend in the West will understand it. You know, after the announcement of the Abraham Accord, those who are radicalized, who hijacked our heart and the mind in the Arab world for decades, I mean the Muslim Brotherhood, they start, you know, creating a new organization, you know, to fight against the peace process. They are not defending or supporting the Palestinian cause and rights. No, it's an issue for them to keep this hate narrative within the region, you know, to create things that will divide us in the region. You know, it's very important to understand this, Rob. The Middle East is not only Arab. We have Kurds, you know, we have Berber, we have other ethnic actually in the region. And it's not Muslim. It's not Jews only. We have Christian, we have Yazidi, we have Ashuri, you know, we have all these different religions and faith. And actually, the root of most of the religion of the world in this part of the world, Judaism and Christianity, their root is not in the United States or in Germany or in the UK. It's here, it's in the Middle East. But unfortunately, those Muslim Brotherhood, they started a campaign actually. And unfortunately, some of them are based in Europe, you know, and in Canada to fight against the peace process and to start also promoting the hate narrative, not only against Israel, but using some verses of the Quran or the saying of the Prophet against Jews. And, you know, personally, you know, you mentioned about Zaina, she got some death threat. You know, I've been receiving these for the last 15 years. I don't care about them. But at the end, they are terrifying people from speaking up, from coming forward, from having the courage, because people, you know, some of them, they don't want to risk their life or their family lives. So I see the main challenge actually from those Muslim Brotherhood members who started creating some organization. They call them to fight normalization with Israel. But actually, it's not, they are not against normalization. They are against bringing us together. They are against what the common value that we share as human beings. They always want to divide us, you know. So this is the only obstacle I see. But I believe the new Arab generation, they want peace. They want a better future, you know, and we have to approach them, and we should create new initiatives that will gain their heart and their mind, and we should create the narrative that will be convincing to them, not to us. And I believe that's doable and we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Zaina, specifically in the Palestinian case, how much of a challenge is it to differentiate between, as you said in your remarks, the violent political conflict, which has had victims, tragic victims, between that on the one hand and genocide, the Holocaust on the other hand? How difficult is it to make that argument?
Actually, the Holocaust, it's a tragedy and effect, and we all have a sacred responsibility to teach it and that to avoid its recurrence again. So in my view, actually, as a Palestinian, and how I see from a Palestinian perspective, the Palestinians hold a profound feelings of victimization as an essential part of their identity. So they are unable actually to relinquish their feeling of being victims. Their attitudes toward the Holocaust is more comparative rather than empathizing with the other. And the question is why? It's because they are living in the status quo of occupation, actually. And they are, as I mentioned before in my obstacles, they are not healed yet. And They say, for instance, why you are teaching me Holocaust and they are not teaching their kids Nakba. So they compare it, although we are trying to help them not to compare because it's totally different, but still there is this comparative, why they don't teach and why they teach and all of this. Also, the literature, as I mentioned before, it's all anti-Semitic literature. You cannot find books that portrays the facts, what happened. For instance, when I accompanied, I and Professor Dajani, the students, when the students saw the facts at the concentration camps, I saw them, they changed, they empathized, they started to put themselves in the other shoe. And they start to believe that even that there will be reconciliation one day. So it's important actually to move from theory to practice as well, not only to be dependent on theory only.
Interesting, interesting. And Mehdi, when you think about obstacles to what you're trying to do in Morocco, where are the biggest obstacles coming from?
I think before, like, we should, like, Morocco is part of the Arab world, and for decades the state monopolized and managed Jewish questions, and today there is a widening space for non-state agent to change the narrative about the Jewish questions. And I think Morocco and the Arab world are in the same question and the same on the same point at this level. But as you know, Morocco saw in diversity and as an opportunity to build a better future, and don't see diversity as a threat to national unity. I think this is something much bigger, not related to the Holocaust, but it's affecting Holocaust education in the Arab world and in Morocco specifically. Today, Morocco have made great steps toward preserving Jewish heritage in Morocco, toward like Holocaust education, a non-official way, but there is still obstacles. The real obstacle, in my opinion, as we saw the Holocaust as a European story. The Holocaust is not a European story. The Holocaust is a human history. It's a North African history also. And like we saw with your book and your movie that we showed in many times here in Morocco, that there is many Muslims who saved Jews during the Holocaust. And I think this is something very strong. It's a double education. We should educate Muslims about the Holocaust, but we should also educate our Jewish friends about the Muslims who saved the Jews during the Holocaust. I think it's very important. And I think this is the real obstacle. And I think translation is not the way to do that, in my opinion. If we, like, for example, we translate the book Peter Gins, and we talk about shtetl, Yiddish words, to young people, it's not the right way to educate young people about the Holocaust. We should find the right wording. We should talk about the souk. We should use Arab words. We should find stories from the Middle East and from North Africa to educate those young people. I think it should be tailored to our context, and it should be done by young people within the MENA region. I think, as Dr. Naomi said, we should give the torch to the young generation. It's time to give the torch to the young generation to make things happen, and like to really work, and like it should be like sustainable and in the long term.
Interesting. So let me ask all of you, who's winning the online battle on this? I mean, on the one hand, for the first time ever, there are resources in Arabic online that people can access from the U.S. Holocaust Museum and other institutions, the Encyclopedia of the Holocaust in Arabic. You don't have to, you can access it directly in one's own language. And so that's a great advantage. But on the other hand, online platforms amplify the voices of the most radical amongst us. So in your view, who's winning the online, and what more do we need to do for, if you will, the good guys to win the online battle for information and awareness on this issue? Whoever would like to go first on this. Ali, this is right up your alley, I think.
Okay, you see, I'm very active on social media actually, and this is why I want to answer this question from the UAE perspective. You see, since the announcement of the Abraham Accord, we saw the real engagement of the new generation from UAE with the Israeli on social media. And even when the Clubhouse platform started and became famous since last January, every day you will see on this Clubhouse new rooms that created by Arab, Emirati, and Israeli, talking about, you know, sometimes they create a room and they say, no politics. Let's talk what will bring us together. Let's talk about culture. Even, you know, some rooms they create about, they want to talk about kosher, about the food, about the, you know, some movies, Israeli movies or Arab movies, or some Israeli songs or Arab songs. And I see there is great engagement on social media from the UAE side with the Israeli. And this is moving forward. And especially because, you see, I like it, I love it, I'm very optimistic about it, because it's engaged the new generation directly together, without having someone to mentor them or to guide them. They speak to each other from their heart. So this is what I see. And I saw in these rooms, many Bahraini, many Saudis, you see, are participating and engaging in these rooms. So, you know, I see this is moving in the right direction. Saying that, that doesn't mean that every day also we see that those members of the Muslim Brotherhood who are living in Turkey or in London, every day they create their rooms against normalization, again to promote hate against Israel. We see that, and we know who support them. But at the end, you know, I feel those, they serve a certain agenda. From our youth, when they engage from their heart. They feel that they are doing something that they want to do. They feel that it's their role, their duty. And you see, you know, that there is a great outcome of it, where in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, you will see many Israeli, they came to the UAE because some of friends from the UAE got to know them on social media, engage in a dialogue with them. They got an invitation. They are here. They have friends. And it's not an official visit. It's not organized by someone. It's only those young boys and girls interacted together and engaged in creating this relation. This is why I'm very optimistic because of this.
All right, so you say you're optimistic in this.
Yes.
In terms of the sort of the online struggle, Zaina Mehdi, what do you think?
Actually, for me, it's not easy. Still, the Palestinian, for them, it's a taboo topic, and it's not easy to approach them directly. What I do, actually, it's step by step, publishing books, articles, in a way that they can read. And for me, actually, with my students, I just talk to them rationally. That knowledge invites us to better understanding, open new horizons for us, leading the individuals to be able to differentiate among the different shades of truth and falsehood. So you need to talk to them rationally and to bring the Holocaust besides other massacres. I cannot just speak about the Holocaust and ignore others. So I'm just moving like step by step, not to be accused that I am traitor or brainwashing, but in a way that they can accept it with others' massacre and genocides.
Okay, thank you. Mehdi?
I think the two dangers for hate speech and anti-Semitism in Morocco are the online hate speech and sport fields. Concerning the
What's the second one? I'm sorry.
Sport fields, sports. Yeah, like those are the two in Morocco that I think they are dangerous. Concerning the online hate speech, we should not be reactive, but we should be proactive. The problem is that you are just reacting to what they are posting, and I don't think it's the right way to do that. I think we should create our own content, and this content should be created by the young people themselves. And this is like how we can be proactive. If we just react on what they are posting, what they are doing online, I don't think it's the good way to do that. But we should find people within the young people groups to create their own message. And like it will help them remove the dust from their memories and also bring the Muslim-Jewish relations that are very strong in the MENA region. From Morocco to Oman, relations between Muslims and Jews were very strong everywhere. It's true with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it's hurt those relations. But I think this young generation, we can help them remove their dust from their memories and talk with their grandparents so they can remember the relation that we have between Muslims and Jews. And I think we should be really proactive in any of our ways to fight online hate speech.
So let me ask you about how useful, how relevant, how powerful, not just the visits that you are taking with young people, Zaina, but visits that public figures take. How influential is it that that last year there was this visit by 100 imams led by Muhammad al-Isa? Would it make a difference if political leaders, if cultural leaders, if sports figures, if other sort of social influencers did things like, visit concentration camps, make statements, try to change the debate about this? Would that have positive impact in the communities in which you're operating? Zaina, I'll start with you.
Definitely, Robert. I agree with you. It's very important to have such visits and to make it public. For the public opinion, it will change, and for the people, they can swallow it much easier, actually. Yeah. I totally encourage this.
Yeah. Mehdi, what about you in Morocco? Do you think that would be helpful?
Of course, it's helpful. Like just the message of 2009 by His Majesty to the Al-Aden Project, it's helped Mimuna organize the first conference on the Holocaust in 2011. Because for us, he's an example. Then it helped us. The visit of His Majesty to synagogue in Casablanca and to Beit Dakira in Essaouira last year, it's also very powerful that the King, Amir al-Mu'minin, visit a synagogue. It's really powerful. And last visit of like the imams to the camps with Sheikh Al-Isa, and among them there is Imam Abbadi, who is very respected person here in Morocco visiting us. It's really powerful. I think it's really powerful, and it helped young people and Moroccans in general recognize themselves on those people that they respect a lot.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know that, Dr. Ali, I know that your foreign minister met with the Israeli foreign minister at the German Holocaust Memorial in Berlin. Did that have resonance back in your country?
Well, actually, it was very welcomed here within the UAE. Rob, UAE is a very diverse community. We have more than 200 nationality, and people here, they see, the added value of having a very diverse community, whereas, all these people from different religion, different ethnic, different nationality, enjoying living in a peace and harmony and prosperity for all. So, it was very welcomed, and actually between the general public here, it was like an awareness that they should go and visit these camps and learn from them. And I am sure after, these Corona restrictions are removed, you will see that many from the UAE are visiting these camps and writing about them.
I'd like to ask a somewhat complicated question. I'm going to turn to a question from our audience in just a minute, but I'd like to ask a somewhat complicated question. The panel is titled Teaching the Holocaust in the Arab World, and each of you quite appropriately focus on your own sort of national experiences. Emirati, Moroccan, Palestinian. And so my question is, how do you flow back and forth between your national experience and your sort of larger pan-Arab experience? And I say it in the following context. Regrettably, there have been terrible mass atrocities, Arab on Arab or Arab on citizens of Arab world over the last generation, whether it's Saddam and the Kurds or Assad in Syria. I mean, things that are beyond comprehension, gassing one's own people, for example, all of which play into genocide awareness. How much of this, even if it didn't happen in your own national experiences, but it happened in a broader Arab environment, how much of this filters back? I mean, how much do Moroccans and Palestinians and Emiratis appreciate that Arab leaders gassed their own people? And has this had an impact on, what it means to have a genocide in the Middle East? Dr. Ali?
Yeah, okay. Well, Rob, when it's come to the UAE, you see, we are a small country. We got independent in 1971. And, before that, we didn't have anything. Myself, I was born in a house, there is no electricity, there is no water, there is no toilet. And my house was next to the palace. The day the electricity went to the palace, I got it the same day. The water received in the palace, I got it the same day. So what you see in the UAE actually is an accomplishment that we strive to make it within the last 50 years. And this is why, we are part of a region, but we were able to create a model, not only for the region, but for the world, where that we have more than 200 nationality. People are coming here, enjoying a lifestyle they miss it in their own country. And we feel that they are welcome. Rob, after the announcement of the Abraham Accord, there was the first public meeting on Zoom for the Jewish community within the UAE with others Jewish leaders from different parts of the world. And they asked me to give a speech, an opening remarks. So I said, the first thing, the message I want to send to you, that you are welcomed in the UAE. We need you. It's not that you need to come and find a place that you want to live and feel, that stable and safe, and you want to do business. No, we want you, because as my brother Mahdi said, diversity, we see it in the UAE as a source of strength, not a threat. What happened in the Arab world in the last 70 years, we saw that the Arabs are victims of their leaders. It's not they are victims because the Palestinian conflict. You will see that the number of Arab who were killed by the Arab regime is more than all Arabs that were killed in a war with Israel. So our issue, actually, we see it the issue of leadership that we had in the Arab world. This is why, if you follow the survey that is conducted by many organizations about the Arab youth, 86% of the Arab youth, they wish they can move and live in the UAE because they see this model is flourishing. Of course, we can't separate us from the region. We can't create walls and boundary. No, we are part of that region. This is why we are striving to engage with the region, show them, the added value of the model that we have, and offer a help in any area that they want to see. This is why, when we send this, the hope to Mars, our Prime Minister, the hashtag that he put it in Twitter, the Arabs to Mars, because we want the Arabs to look at the good side and to be optimistic and to change their priority and to engage in building and developing their nation rather than be victims of this ideology of extremism or hate.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ali. Any other comment on my question on genocide in the Arab world and its impact on understanding of genocide and the Holocaust?
Of course, like what's happening with the Rohingya in Burma or the Muslims in China have like a really bad effect on on Arab societies. And what's happening in Syria today, we have many Syrian refugees also in Morocco, and we hear their stories and what they suffered in Syria. This have an impact on the narrative of genocides in the Arab world, because before, genocide was something far from the Arab world. It happened in Rwanda. It happened in the Holocaust in Europe. But now we have some kinds of we cannot call it like the Holocaust, but it's a kind of genocide that is happening to Muslims from China to Burma to Syria. And that, I think it's something that we can feel it. And normally we're in talk with the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum to have a kind of an exhibit who is like not only talking about the Holocaust as one of the stories of genocides, but to have all those talking about different genocides and how it's affecting humans. And it's one of the dark chapters of human history as a whole.
Zaina, anything to add?
Regarding your question, Rob, I think Palestinians are aware of what is happening in the Middle East from genocides, massacres, whether it's Syria or Bursa or all what you mentioned. But the problem, actually, what I see that the Palestinians themselves, they are indulged in their own victimhood, that I am the victim and not the Israeli. And that's a problem. The Palestinian needs to overcome the victimhood status and to become responsible more. That's what I see from Palestinian perspective, actually. And of course, media plays a crucial role in bringing all what is happening in the Middle East, such as Al Jazeera, one, of the best channel they watch all the time. Yeah, of course, they are aware, but as I mentioned, they are indulged still in 1948, 1967, all of this. They are not going beyond the problem.
Mm-hmm. I see. So I have a question from one of our viewers, I think probably specifically for Dr. Ali. Do you see a potential? Was very impressive. You refer, you're noting that the Ministry of Education, that there will be curriculum changes starting in September in the Emirati education system. Do you see any potential for coordinating among ministries of education regionally to enhance or to create tools and resources? It might be more financially wiser to create some sort of regional Arab tools and resources, or sub-regionally in the Gulf, to find ways to have Holocaust education and awareness in school curriculums or teacher training efforts. Are there opportunities for regional activity on this?
Well, first, I'd like to thank my friend David for the question. Well, you see, my view is this: we shouldn't wait until those ministers or people in charge of education until they are convinced to do so. I think we should take advantage of this opportunity, having the Abraham Accord, the momentum of having peace between Israel, the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco. We have to take advantage of this by creating new initiatives. And I believe the United States should play a major role in that. And this is why, I talked with many American friends. I told them the new administration, when they approach the region, the first thing should be on their agenda is the peace initiatives, not the Iranian, nuclear program, because peace at the end will include that. But what we need to take advantage of having this, peace initiatives to change the region. Actually, changing the region is not only by signing agreement between the government, But we want initiatives that will engage the people, will engage the private sector, will engage creating a dialogue with religious leaders, culture activists, public figures, and also those who are in charge of the educational system within the Arab world. So I think we shouldn't wait. It's not, well, the UAE started when Bahrain already started, by the way, but when this country or that country will start. No, we should, bring them to the table, show them the added value of doing so and encourage them and pave the way for them. And I think there is many platforms, especially we can do it through the GCC Council, or we can do it also through the CISCO. It's the Arab Organization for Education and Culture. But, we shouldn't wait until those come by themselves. We should take the lead and bring them together and put these initiatives on the table and encourage them to do so.
So Dr. Ali and El-Mehdi come from countries that have, of course, just made their own agreements with Israel and opening up all new measures of opportunities. Zainab, Palestinians and Israelis, your peace diplomacy has been pretty non-existent for some years now. So on a popular level, on the streets in Jerusalem and Ramallah and Bethlehem and wherever, do you find is there a willingness to engage in people-to-people programming and exchanges, or is that becoming even more difficult these days?
Actually, Robert, there is activities going on, like in Israel, by bringing Palestinians with Israelis together face to face. I forgot the organization names actually. But there is activities in civil society. It's taking place already. Yes, indeed, there is. But of course, you can find people who are against normalizing relations with like UAE and Israel, and some people, they are happy with it. So it depends on with whom you are speaking to.
And in Palestinian society, and from your experience, is merely meeting with Israelis and talking with them today, 28 years after the Oslo Accords, is that viewed as sort of treasonous normalization, or is it just something that is a normal, regular thing to do?
Actually, I don't see it normalization from my side, because we are living with them for now decades. I am living in Beit Hanina. It's 5 minutes from Pisgat Ze'ev. So sure. We go to the same mall, to the same doctors, to the same. So I cannot not speak to them. I cannot stop the relation with them. I'm traveling from the airport, so I cannot stop talking to them, basically, simply. So
absolutely, that's your experience. But
yeah.
Do you think that is it your professional experience that people are more willing to talk with Israelis or less willing to talk with Israelis, even though that we're 20 some odd years into the this peace experience?
Actually, Robert, it depends. It depends. I cannot generalize that all Palestinians are willing to talk to Israelis, and I cannot say that Palestinians are not talking to Israelis. They are talking, some of course, but I cannot generalize.
Fair enough. All right, so we only have a couple of minutes left. I just want to very quickly ask each of you, is there one thing, if you could, come to Washington, get your vaccinations, come to Washington and talk to the Secretary of State or the President on this sort of issue, one thing you'd like the United States to do that would improve the potential for understanding, education, awareness on the issues that we're discussing, something that the United States can contribute to this. Mehdi, I'll start with you.
I think it's a tough question, but for us in the Middle East, I think that the Abraham Accords are offering an opportunity that we didn't dream of. I think it's an opportunity not only for the people of Morocco, but also for Israel and the whole region. I think what we are now and these peace agreements between Morocco and Israel and between Israel and other states, it's an opportunity for all the Middle East. It's the time for the young generation to build a better future, and we are building the better future, and we should continue on what we are now and what we are doing. I think this is the message that I can share with you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Zaina, what, if you could wave your magic wand, what would it be?
Actually, my magic one, I will just conclude it in one sentence. To empathize does not mean that you are forgetting or sacrificing justice, but you are upholding empathy that advancing justice. This means when I think of empathy for Jews, or I think of empathy for Palestinians, so we begin to work for justice and reconciliation, and we have to rise above hate and anger and always be guided by social justice. That's what I would add.
Okay, very powerful. Thank you. Thank you very much. And Dr. Ali, final word.
Okay, well, my message to His Excellency, the Secretary of State, will be don't use, the region has changed. Don't use the same tool that had been used in the last 30, 40 years with the region. Use the Abraham Accord as your gateway in dealing with the region, politically, economically, security, in all areas. But don't miss the opportunity. The region has changed. The region are eager for peace, especially the new generation. Make the right move in talking to the region by creating a narrative of peace, targeting the new generation.
All right, very good. So on this Yom HaShoah, this day of memory and action, as all of you have underscored, I want to thank you all very much. Dr. Ali Noemi, Dr. Zaina Barakat, El-Mekdi Boudra, thank you so much for joining us at this special event hosted by the Washington Institute. Thank you.